Thank you, everyone. And as you will see, I'm the Chinese challenge in this team. And I'm from the Institute of Psychology, Chinese Academy of Sciences. And basically, I'm trained as a developmentalist. And my presentation is on Chinese children's understanding of afterlife. So the first question must be, what is afterlife? Is there a definition? And this is which we checked on internet. And the definition is like that: afterlife is referred to as life after death. So this is a very brief definition. And then it can be it's a concept of a realm or the realm itself, in which an essential part of an individual's identity or consciousness continues to reside after the death of the body. So this is kind of the definition. But then the next question is there an afterlife? Or do you believe there's an afterlife? So I guess most of the people in this room, especially those from mainland China, as I do, we would say no to this question. But I don't know, Justin, how about you? Even though we will say with Chinese, mainland Chinese people, we would say no, there's no afterlife. But I once run a study with the college students in Beijing. I asked them to answer this question. But they would answer me that knowing that there's no afterlife makes them feel horrible and sad, right? So even they don't have this belief, at least they have this wish. The wish there's an afterlife. And we know some researchers, they run study. And for those people who believe there's an afterlife, and this may promote cancer patients' mental health. So this belief might be a good thing. So we say this belief may promote mental health sometimes. Okay. I'd like to show you these pictures, and I want to say why. As I said, even most of people, we don't think there's an afterlife, but it doesn't mean we don't have this tradition in Chinese culture. And you see the picture, the left one, this is the picture which is discovered at the Mogao Caves, and it is called the Paradise of Guru. I don't know how to spell it, but it means Buddha. When you check it on internet, I checked this word. It means Yao Shi Fu. It's a Buddha, right? Yeah. So it gives us a picture of a very happy world. It's far from our current life, but we hope we have a world like this in the future. But then I think most of you would be very familiar with these clay warriors. This is very famous in the world, and this is from my hometown, Xi'an, you know that? So when you see these clay warriors, we would think that the first emperor of Qing dynasty may have the belief there's an afterlife. So even after he died, he still wished there was an army to serve him or to follow his command. So if there's no afterlife, it's meaningless to have these clay warriors. And also, when you look at the picture in the front, and those from mainland China, you must be very familiar with this, right? This is the, Justin, can you tell what's that? That one. What's that? Okay, so this is the currency in the dead world. And this is very common in China, even nowadays. Because, for example, in Qingming Festival or Qingming Day, or in some specific days, we say like Guijie and some other days, you can still see people burn this currency, this is kind of cash. They burn it, and they wish the dead people can receive it and consume the money in another world. So this is very useful. And we also see that some people, they now burn the houses. Houses very expensive in Beijing. They burn houses and they burn cars. So that means if you ask them, they will say there's no afterlife, but why do they burn this to their dead ancestor or dead member of the family? So they're kind of, sometimes I feel confused. We say there's no afterlife, but we're still doing things that seems there's an afterlife. So this money can also be used to bribe the king of the hill for a shorter stay or to escape punishment. So it's useful. Money is always useful in this world or in the other world. And then the next question is, why do we study children's afterlife understanding? In fact, as in Justin's talk and as in Deb Kellerman's talk, we all mentioned about children's cognitive development. So we are running this study from the perspective of cognitive development. As Professor Bond mentioned, Jean Piaget is the god of our developmental psychologist. So once we talk about cognitive development study, we have to say something about Piaget. Piaget said children are kind of animism and artificialism. So for animism, we mean in Chinese, it's a kind of 泛灵论. That means children tended to believe that everything, either non-living things or living things, they have a life. But when they are getting older and older, they tended to distinguish living from non-living things. But in the very beginning, they would think, like say glasses can be alive, but if you break it, it's dead. But later on, they can say, oh, those things that they can move by themselves are things that are alive. For example, in this case, children will say, okay, then rivers must be alive because they move by themselves. And then later on, they will say, okay, animals are alive because they move by themselves. But they don't think plants are kind of living things because plants never move. And only after, when children are older than 8 or even 10, and children can distinguish living and non-living things. But recently, developmental psychologists believe that Piaget underestimates children's cognitive ability. So now the dominant theory to explain children's cognitive development is called theory. That means children have their own theory in some core domains. Such the 3 core domains that are widely accepted are naive biology, naive physics, and theory of mind, also called naive psychology. So when we study children's understanding of afterlife, in fact, we are understanding we are trying to understand how they develop the concept of biological phenomena like birth and reproduction and growth and the disease, like Mendeley will talk about, and death, and see whether they could distinguish living things and non-living things, and these are the main components to tell whether they have a separate naive biology. But till now, of course, we don't know whether children have a naive religion. And though there are many studies in these topics, but still there are some neglected topics, such as how these understandings interrelate and influence each other, and how these understandings transformed as young children move into the school years and beyond. Because so-called naive theory are children's own theory that they build up according to their own experience, and before they have formal education. And how these understandings influenced by cultural belief systems. So there are still a lot of topics that's worth investigating. Till now, in fact, there are a lot of studies on children's understanding of either death or afterlife. And but you will see that those names are basically from the Western scholars. So they found out that preschool children understand that death terminates bodily functions and it is applicable to all living things. And they know that death is universal and irreversible. But the interesting result we found is that younger children were more likely to think all functions cease at death, older children less so. So this is beyond our intuition, because we think when children are getting older and older, they should have more scientific knowledge. So they should be less it shouldn't be like this. But some people find this result, and so can you imagine why? A reasonable hypothesis is that older children are merging ideas about biology and mind to arrive at the possibility of life after death. And children increasingly understand that the mind works independently of the body. Because you will see when children are getting older and older, they noticed that, say, you will need your mind to think, right? But not to sneeze. And you can think about acts that you never actually do. And sometimes we can act unconsciously. So as children are getting older, they can more and more tell these kind of things. It seems body and mind sometimes can be separated. So that might explain why, so when children getting older, they make less so-called scientific judgment. These are the other thing we are interested is about the cultural difference. And as several of the previous speakers, they all mentioned that we have different tradition and different culture as those Westerners. And I don't have to say more about it. But sometimes, even we say we are less religious, but there are some, like Qingming Day, we don't think it's religious explicitly, but it has something to do with this religion ritual or something like that. The other interesting thing is that we found when children or we adults respond to some questions like this, their responses can be different. It can depend on the context. For example, if the subject is in the religious context, they would say mental functions would continue after life. And if it's in the medical context, for example, in the hospital, if a person died and the person is in the hospital, and then both bodily and mental functions ceased. So you will see context may also make a difference. So afterlife ideas must be earlier developing, more general, more strongly held in some cultural circumstances than others. and conceivably may be not arrived at all in some circumstances. Because like in China, we don't have this tradition, and it's not only the tradition, but even now, still there are very few people who are religious. So maybe this religious context, okay, we will see whether this teaming, like, we don't have a religious context, the formal religious context, but we have a teaming day, so it can be used as a sort of like religious context. So the study, in fact, is to try to find out the developmental change of those of Chinese children's understanding. And we also want to expand the notion of situational context to include the medical and the spiritual context in both China and the US. In fact, before this program, I run some study from the perspective of children's naive biology. So I did some, it's kind of, say, pilot study. In fact, I asked our subjects what happens to an animal after it dies, or what happens to a person after he or she dies. And I compared the result with a previous study that's already published. So this is, later I will show you just a very simple, because that's the request of this presentation, try to make everything simple. So when you see the figures, you will see it's clear. And we just asked this open-ended question, and then you will see the why. Oh, what happened? I don't know what happened. But anyway, we compared the study, the result, with Pauline and Evan's study. And we noticed that, okay, let me show you. The blue bar is the Chinese, and the red bar shows the results in Pauline and Evan's study. So in this study, okay, here it means number 4. That's the we code it as the mentioned afterlife or spiritual responses. I mean, after what can happen if a human being died. So you will see that this is American and this is the Chinese data. So you will see that really Americans, they mention more about spiritual responses. They have more spiritual responses. I wonder what happened, because there should be something above that shows what the figure means. Can I maybe see it here? Oh, okay, it's missed. But, okay. Yeah, okay, so then I will just go through it very quickly and just give you a very brief impression of what the data is like. But anyway, what I want to show you is that we compared our study, the data of our study, and the study by Evans, and we found out that really in their data, the subjects show more supernatural responses, and more spiritual responses. Now let's move on to the current study. And this is as I said, this is a comparison. This is a direct comparison between American children and Chinese children. The American children are from the data are collected by my collaborator in University of Michigan. So Professor Henry Wellman and Professor Margaret Evans. So the participants in our study, we have 4 years old, 5 and 6, and 7 to 8, and 9 to 12 years old children, and then we have a group of adults. And for the adults, in fact, in the very beginning, we had thought that because modern cities in China are more and more similar or more like American society. I mean, even the value or even the everything with the globalization. So we thought there might be some difference between the rural adults and urban adults. So that's why we collected data also from the rural area. But in fact, on these questions, we didn't find a significant difference. The questions are, the materials and the procedure are like this. We showed children several stimuli, and we have 3 categories. One is human beings, and one is non-human animals, and then we have artifacts. And the other factor is context. We have a medical context, which is in the hospital, and the religious context for Chinese is Qingming Festival. And we have close-ended questions like, the question is, for example, I give you example in the religious context. That means, say a person is dead, and then of course he is buried, and then in the Qingming Festival, the family members went to sweep the tomb. That's what we call. And in this case, we are asking the child, can this person think, or can this person dream, or can this person breathe, or can this person eat? Because every time we went to sweep the tomb, we not only to clean the tomb, we also bring a lot of food, all the favorite thing that the person liked when he is alive. So we have fruit and food and liquor and everything. And some, I even saw a book in front of this one must be very intelligent. Yeah. So to read even in another world. So yeah, it worked very hard. And then we have the comparison. These are kind of complicated, but let me just say it very briefly. We found that across age groups, participants more often reported persistence in psychological capacity than persistence in biological capacities. And across capacities, 4 years old and 7 years old children, they more often reported persistence than did 9 to 12-year-olds and adults. This is just a description of the result. I will skip this due to time limitation. And this is the figure shows that in the religious and medical context, and you will see the difference between the different age groups, and also in different contexts, and also in the biological children or adults, they attribute their biological capacity and the psychological capacities. So just to look at very briefly, you will see that the pattern is very similar. Even the biological or psychological or religious or medical, which one is first. But when you look at the figure for the U.S. Children and U.S. Participants, you will see the difference, right? Say let me give you an example, like the 7 to 8 years old, when it's in the religious context, they would more likely to say that their psychological capacities persist. And then we also ask an open-ended question: what happens to a person after they die? And you will see these, the above one is the US data, and this is the China data. And the interesting thing is here, you see the blue bar means the that the participants mentioned the supernatural states. And you will see obviously that US participants, they mention these supernatural states more often than Chinese participants. But still, you will see still with even young children and also adults, they have this yellow bar. That means it doesn't mean it didn't exist. And you will see that the adults, they mention it more than children. So this is a very interesting question or phenomenon to me. So sometimes when you ask the children, they will say something definitely. They will say no, definitely. But when we ask our college students subjects, they hesitate to say so. So what happened? They would say, sometimes they mention supernatural states, but they will also say, I don't know. There might be afterlife. It's just beyond our ken. It's possible. So that's kind of interesting. I want just to give the to summarize, we will say Chinese participants' references to sensation peaked in the early elementary school years and decreased thereafter. In both countries, older participants referred less to ordinary persistence and sensation and more to religious, ritual, and supernatural. And by 9 years, US children mentioned the supernatural states more often than Chinese children. So that's our result. And the conclusion could be, but that's something we can discuss whether it's really a conclusion. So after achieving an understanding of the finality of biological death toward the end of preschool years, children and adults often go on to entertain the possibility that psychological capacities continue beyond death. There are some portion of the participants' responses. And they can entertain ideas of metaphysical beings who continue to exist in another realm after life. And afterlife ideas are more likely to be entertained in cultures that encourage this sort of thinking. But exist, I can just say exist, it's not dominant responses, but it still exists even within cultures that do not. So I want to thank all these people and the foundation, and thank you for your attention, and yeah.